The Panama Canal has been making headlines after Trump's controversial remarks about it. Things got even more intense when the Panama Canal Authority refused to let U.S. ships pass for free, making the situation worse, at least for a while. But while everyone was focused on this drama, a much bigger story was unfolding. Plans are already in motion to challenge the Panama Canal's monopoly, and China is secretly involved. The Panama Canal is a man-made 82-kilometer waterway and one of the world's most important trade routes. It connects the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, handling 5% of global trade, about $270 billion worth of cargo every year. But now, things are changing. The Panama Canal is in trouble, and Mexico is working on its own alternative, a project that could shake up global trade, the Interoceanic Corridor. For years, severe droughts have been draining the canal's water levels, causing major disruptions. Reports suggest that ship traffic has dropped by about 29%, and some sources say global trade through the canal fell nearly 32% in 2023-24 compared to 2022. As the Panama Canal struggles, Mexico is bringing back an old idea with a modern twist, the Interoceanic Corridor in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. This project is getting a $7.5 billion investment from the Mexican government, and it could become a serious competitor. But why is the Panama Canal so important? How can Mexico's Interoceanic Corridor become its biggest rival? And what does Trump's frustration have to do with this? More importantly, where does China fit into all of this? The history of the Panama Canal. Panama sits between North and South America, and an isthmus is just a narrow strip of land with water on both sides that connects two bigger land masses. The problem? There's no natural waterway linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Before the canal, ships had only one option, sailing all the way around the southern tip of South America known as Cape Horn. This was not only a long route, but also extremely dangerous, often taking weeks or even months. In fact, it's considered one of the riskiest sailing routes in the world. The Panama Canal changed everything. Instead of taking months, ships could now cross the canal in just 8 to 10 hours and complete their journeys in 15 to 20 days. The U.S. played a major role in making this happen. In exchange for supporting Panama's independence, the U.S. secured the right to build and control the canal. On November 3, 1903, with U.S. backing, Panama declared independence. After 10 years of hard work, the Panama Canal officially opened in August 1914, with the SS Ancon being the first ship to pass through. Despite facing huge challenges and sacrifices, the canal became a crucial trade route. For decades, the U.S. controlled the canal, using it for both economic and military purposes. But Panamanians weren't happy. They saw it as foreign control over their own land. Protests grew, and by the 1960s, it was clear that something had to change. In 1977, U.S. President Jimmy Carter and Panamanian leader Omar Torrijos signed a deal, agreeing that the U.S. would hand over the canal to Panama by the end of the 20th century. And on December 31, 1999, that's exactly what happened. Panama officially took control of the canal. Since then, the Panama Canal Authority, ACP, has managed the canal and even expanded it to allow bigger ships, the current crisis. But now, the canal is facing a serious problem, one that could shake up global trade. Climate change is hitting the canal hard. The canal depends on fresh water from nearby lakes to operate its locks. Every time a ship passes through, millions of gallons of water are lost into the ocean. But recent droughts have drastically reduced the water supply, forcing authorities to limit the number of ships that can pass. Some ships have been stuck waiting for weeks, and shipping companies are desperately looking for alternatives. That's why Mexico's Interoceanic Corridor is gaining so much attention. With the Panama Canal struggling, could this new trade route become its biggest competitor? And how exactly is China involved in all of this? Mexico's big plan. This is where Mexico steps in. The Isthmus of Tehuantepec is the narrowest part of Mexico, stretching just 188 miles from the Pacific Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico. And right here, Mexico's government is building a powerful alternative to the Panama Canal, the Interoceanic Corridor. The idea is simple. Instead of ships crossing a canal, cargo will be unloaded at one port, transported across Mexico by train, and then reloaded onto ships at the other end. To make this work, Mexico is upgrading its ports, building new highways and railways, and setting up special economic zones to attract businesses. And guess who's interested? China. China has been investing heavily in Latin America, especially in infrastructure and trade routes. With this new corridor, China could reduce its reliance on the Panama Canal, which still has strong U.S. influence. This could completely change global trade and shift power in the region. And that's exactly why Trump's comments about the Panama Canal made headlines. The U.S. sees the canal as a key part of global trade, and any competition, whether from Mexico or China, is bound to cause tensions. The history of the interoceanic corridor. So what exactly is the interoceanic corridor, and why is it a threat to the Panama Canal? Surprisingly, this idea isn't new. It actually dates back to the early 20th century. At one point, Mexico's interoceanic railway was a real competitor to the Panama Canal. But then, the Mexican Revolution broke out, leading to civil wars that made the railway too risky for shipping companies. There was a high chance of cargo getting stolen or damaged. On top of that, most companies using the corridor were American, and they preferred supporting the U.S.-led Panama Canal rather than a Mexican rival. But the biggest issue was efficiency. With the Mexican route, companies had to unload their cargo, move it by train, and reload it onto another ship. Meanwhile, the Panama Canal allowed ships to pass straight through without unloading, saving both time and money. That's why the Panama Canal became the go-to route for global trade. Today, an average of 14,000 ships pass through it every year, carrying billions of tons of goods. The interoceanic corridor is making a comeback. By the end of 2023, Mexico had made major progress on this project. The railway had been modernized with new logistics centers, stronger security, and improved port facilities to handle more cargo. The Mexican government has been actively promoting the corridor as a faster, cheaper alternative to the Panama Canal, and global shipping companies are paying attention. If everything goes as planned, this revived route could change global trade, challenging the long-standing dominance of the Panama Canal. So far, Mexico has invested $6 billion into the project, with another $2 billion coming from private investors. What this means for the Panama Canal. As we mentioned earlier, China has already gained influence over the Panama Canal through private investments. However, the U.S. is still its biggest customer. Here's where things could take a turn for the worse for Panama. About 40% of U.S. container traffic passes through the Panama Canal each year, making the U.S. one of its biggest sources of income. But if the U.S. shifts a significant portion of its shipping to Mexico's interoceanic corridor, it could save a lot of money. For Panama, this would be disastrous. The country heavily relies on canal revenue, which makes up around 4% of its total GDP and plays a huge role in government finances. If traffic through the canal drops sharply, Panama's economy could take a major hit. Right now, the only serious competitor to the Panama Canal is Mexico's interoceanic corridor. But can it truly replace the canal? That's something only time will tell. That's all for the video. See you in the next video.